everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we have a special guest. Her name is Hannah Stewart. She's my friend. We met, I would say, maybe a couple of years ago, around this time at IMAT. And I remember you were helping Bedelium Tools. And I was there to buy some brushes. But when we really bonded was actually in the mold shop at Millennium Effects. Remember the conversation we were having at the time?
I sure do. We were having a deep discussion about astrology.
It was very interesting because that's how we found common ground, and that's actually why we are here today to talk to you about it, because I'm very aware that it's such a big part of Hannah's life, and I find it very complex. So I invited Anna to shed some light on a few points. So let's go with the first question. I would like to ask you, how do you define astrology, and when was the first time you had contact with it?
So to me, I believe astrology is a healing tool that can be used to encourage self-awareness and personal development. I also believe that from a spiritual standpoint, that the birth chart is our soul's blueprint, and it shows us why we're here, what are our lessons, what are our talents, and what is it about ourselves that we need to balance out, like what aspects that may seem negative but actually truly need just a bit of introspection to help come back to their true positive qualities. And when I first was introduced to astrology, I had just recently been born. So I was totally unaware of it, but my mum, at the hospital I was born at, there was a service available for new mothers to have an astrology chart made up for their newborn. And I only found out about this later when we were going through old paperwork, and I found this paper saying Hannah Stewart, 24th September, sun sign Libra, and there's a really beautiful paragraph about what sort of what the qualities of a Libra sun person would be. So at the time, obviously I wasn't into astrology. I think we still do have it. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I think last time I saw it was when I was 15. But I just find it fascinating that one of the very first things which has greatly impacted me now was what I was introduced to. Was pretty much there when I was born. And the next time that I found astrology again was through my friend Des McMahon. Now Des came to Millennium for a live cast back in April 2016. And what's great about Des, he has a real natural affinity for the supernatural and for the mystical aspects of life. So, and for myself and my family, I wanted to talk to him about certain dreams I'd had, one which really spooked me out, and also things that my family had experienced as well. So he seemed like the right man to talk to. After having a good chat with him, he recommended looking at a YouTuber called Michelle Knight, who is an astrologer and a psychic. And I found out that she also had astrology videos. So I went over to check them out. I found the Libra Sun video, clicked on it, and the information she was giving was completely new and strange to me. You know, at the time I was pretty open just to sort of expand my viewpoint. I came from quite a strict Christian view to now actually wanting to understand what other viewpoints were there in the world. And so I thought, okay, like she's talking about moon signs, she's talking about ascendants, about transits, like what does this actually mean? And what I did, I found an online calculator, which I would like to share with you now to give an example of how I calculated my birth chart. And so what I'm going to do is share my screen with you. Hold on, share. There you go. All right, so I'm not going to put in my information, but we're going to say, like, if someone is being born today, let's call him baby Jeff. It's the 7th of May, so let's find the 7th of May 2020. Lucky Jeff being born at this time.
Yes, in the year of abundance.
Year of fun. And so it's nearly 5 o'clock now, so let's say he's born at 5 p.m. in where I was born, actually, in the grand old city of High Wycombe. Let's find you. And this is one of the reasons we put in, or you'll see in a minute, why you have a birth time is that it organises your ascendant. So that means the sign that is rising in the east, the constellation that's rising in the east, is your ascendant sign. And with that, it organises your chart layout. So, for example, baby Jeff has 17 degrees Taurus as his sun sign, and his ascendant is 10 degrees Libra. So as we look down here is baby Jeff's chart. So example, here is his ascendant here. So you see these numbers lay out around the circular chart. These are called the houses of the natal chart. So you have the first house, which is your ascendant house. Then you have, goes around 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And you see this, this is called the midheaven. And the midheaven is to do with your outside personalities, like what they say is like your online persona. So if someone's got such an exuberant extrovert persona online, so for example, this person may come across as kind of reserved, sort of quite a sensitive nature, but also can be very nurturing because that's the Cancerian qualities. But you look down, but actually at home, that they run quite a tight ship in their home, because the 4th house is home, whereas your 10th house is your reputation, your career, status. And I'll go back to ascendant here. This your ascendant with Libra, you also have what's called a chart lord. So for example, this is how people see you. And for Libra, because it's ruled by Venus, Venus is now sitting in the 9th house, which is of philosophy, religion, travel, learning, further education. So for baby Jeff, one of the important themes of his life will involve 9th house qualities, but that also may be through artistic endeavors, through beauty, through relationships. And this is just a rough summary. And as you can see, there's so much information already for baby Jeff.
Definitely.
Yeah, so you can see it's not just your sun sign or your moon. You got obviously sun in Taurus and moon in Scorpio.
And Hannah, I can't stop but notice that baby Jeff has also the moon sign in Scorpio.
Yeah, I know. And opposition he's got here as well. So there's really so much you would be able to tell about. It's like, and if you are a trained astrologer, you've done your research and you've done your groundwork on how to read a chart, you would be able to show what are Jeff's weaknesses, what are Jeff's strengths, and what he's here to learn. And this is, for me, when I saw this, of course, I was completely bamboozled because there's so much information. And I came back to this later. Like, it wasn't an immediate jump in head first into astrology. Like, I saw this kind of like, oh, okay, this is kind of a bit too much for me. Went away for a couple of months, then came back, did a bit of research, saw a few aspects in my chart. I'm like, okay, that's starting to make sense. Then came away from it. It was only until mid 2017 was when I really fell down the rabbit hole and have been in love with astrology ever since, really.
So the moon sign, from my understanding, it has to do with your emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what else?
It's to do with your mind as well. So pretty much it's how you view the world. Your sun is your identity and ego.
Okay.
Your moon is like, and actually the moon is probably the most important placement in your chart because it is our own perception. And when you have what's called a synastry chart, when you compare your chart to someone else's, if you have moon contacts, that's a really good sign that actually you mentally click with that person.
Okay. So if, for example, I have the moon sign in Scorpio, so I would connect very well with baby Jeff.
And also depending what your sign, which degree point you have here. Because also what's interesting, I missed out about the ascendant, is the time is important. Like, this is why in Indian astrology they are hot right down to the second what time you were born, because every 2 minutes the degree sign for your ascendant changes. So for example, if this was actually 29 degrees Libra and you wrote his chart as being 10 minutes later, he would then actually have a Scorpio ascendant, not a Libra ascendant.
Oh.
And then that would change. So then his moon would be in his first house. And so he would have more Mars and Plutonian qualities in his life, plus having the moon in his ascendant.
Interesting.
Because the sign Scorpio is ruled by both Mars and Pluto.
Okay. So then the houses have to do with the different areas of our lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I got it. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next question.
Great.
So maybe we can stop the screen sharing. Okay, so you mentioned that astrology is a healing tool, and if you don't mind, could you share with us a little bit about your healing journey with astrology? How did it help you heal?
So I only started using astrology as a healing tool in my mid-20s. Before then, between the ages of 18 to 24, I'd been experiencing severe bouts of depression. And what I hadn't realised at the time, that it coincided with me being diagnosed with Crohn's disease and colitis, which I also found out that people who have these conditions are at a higher risk of developing depression. But of course, I didn't know this. So I was experiencing these extreme emotional roller coasters and had no idea why I was so irrational and short-tempered and moody. And even though it was kind of like me being a young woman and also being a sensitive person as well, it was sometimes brushed off as me being hypersensitive, but actually it was my body reacting as well. So as well as dealing with the humiliation of actually having a body that was, in my eyes, gross and flawed, I was also still had this crippling anxiety about with my self-esteem, that I hadn't had a successful relationship, and pretty much just felt like no matter what I was doing, I was never good enough. Even though my university went well and I was still working hard in my freelance career, I still felt like I would never be good enough. It wasn't until 2016 that an incident happened, which pretty much was like the straw that broke the camel's back. All of a sudden, I couldn't brush all those insecurities under the carpet. It all bubbled up to the surface, and I had to confront them. For a while, I was very sort of ashamed by the idea of going to therapy as well, especially also using medication. I never took medication for depression, but eventually I did go to therapy because I got to a point when I was so upset, so distraught, that I started having quite damaging suicidal thoughts. Is one thing that I've been really embarrassed to talk to people about, because in my eyes it felt like weakness, that I should be able to handle this, but when you're in that moment you feel so alone and like you're the only person who experiences those kind of thoughts. I now realize and thankfully through what's been talked about in the media and also with friends as well, that so many people do go through having suicidal thoughts. And it was from that point I started going to therapy because I thought I must do something about this, because I can't allow myself to keep feeling this awful. And I think now looking back at myself, how I used to be, I'm so glad that I had that time, because, and I know a lot of people say they call it a moment, the dark night of the soul,
Yes.
where you really do this deep introspection and start realizing who are you and why are you here and what is your purpose. Like, for a while, my identity was being a Christian, and throughout my teens and early 20s, that was who I am. So I'm like I don't need to do any inner work, really. And the idea of self-love and self-care never really crossed my mind, because I felt accepted by God already, but it wasn't a true acceptance, like through my own action, through my own heart and mind. So when I lost my faith as well, that again shook my not only my core belief system, like what do I actually truly believe now, but also my own sense of self, that I didn't really know who I was anymore. So that's why I would use work as a way of disguising and to distract myself from how I was truly feeling. Also, funny enough, this coincided. So with astrology, you have what's called the tropical chart, which is what Western astrologers use. In Eastern astrology, which is called sidereal and Vedic, they have a system called the Mahadasha system, which is ruled, which is sorted out. It's basically a planetary time period throughout your life. So it depends on which constellation your moon sign rules. So, for example, if you have the nakshatra star of Pushya, that sign is ruled by Saturn. Therefore, you will start in the Saturn planetary time period. And as I was discovering this, until like last 2 years ago, I found out about this information. So it wasn't in 2016, it was only like back in 2018. I realized that this time of grief and ultimately a spiritual awakening coincided with the Ketu Mahadasha. And Ketu, everyone has a Ketu placement in their chart. It's called the South Node in the Western chart, but Ketu in the Vedic. And what this placement is about, where we feel the most comfortable, where we ultimately feel like we've conquered that area, but we don't get the most satisfaction from, because we already feel we've done it, you know, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. When you enter your Ketu Mahadasha, there's a real emphasis at first about detachment and letting go. And where Ketu sits in my chart in the 7th house of relationships, I felt this overwhelming urge to cut myself off from people. Like, the first time in my life, I didn't want a relationship anymore. And even though it kind of really was a struggle, tug of war between this relationship, which I really wanted and I was fighting for, but then also Katie trying to teach me, like, you need to let go and you need to move on, because first and foremost, we are individuals, we are our own souls, like, we are individuals. And I think for all my life I was so consumed with the idea of finding a partnership, finding my other half, because it's so much drummed into us, especially as women, that we should have a man and that we are not complete unless we're in a romantic relationship. And most songs are about relationships.
Yes.
So I kind of had these rose tinted glasses on, even though the signs were in front of me saying, let go, this isn't the relationship for you. What you need to do right now is focus on developing your own identity, on being who you are. And I know a lot of people will say, you don't need astrology for that. But for coming from certain people who, one, their relationships have been a bugbear, which mine definitely have, to have that indicated in my chart saying now's the time for you to focus on your spiritual progression, and the fact that it coincided with discovering astrology again.
It's like a wake-up call.
It was a wake-up call, and it was also a time, because with astrology, I wasn't immediately straight into it. It kind of took, it was like over a year. I found out my chart details, like where the placements were, kind of left it for a few months, then came back, did a bit more research, like, oh, I see this aspect, what does it mean? And like, I didn't really know what it properly meant until like a year and a half afterwards. And then it was at that point I truly fell down the rabbit hole, and
Yeah, okay.
ever since.
So with all that you said, first I just want to back you up on what you've been through. And I also would like to add that for people who don't know, Dark Night of the Soul is not necessarily just one night. It can be a period of your life that it's usually very hard for you to go through. It feels like you are ripped off everything you once knew, and it forces you to rise like a phoenix. So it's really made for you to let go of what no longer serves you and be more aligned with who you truly are, your true self. And so a lot of the times this also has to do with awakening, because it just brings you closer to the truth. But also, every time I talk to people about this, I usually hear the same questions. So the questions, who I am, what am I doing here, having those kind of thoughts, because we really question what is our purpose in life, what makes us unique. And it happened to me too. I had those thoughts as well, and just like you, I felt embarrassed of having those, because it was such a new thing to me and I didn't know what was going on. And we usually feel very alone.
Yeah.
And so the fact that you just shared it with us, I think it's very brave, and I just want to thank you for that. But also it leads me to the next question, because one of the misconceptions of astrology is having this notion that everything is already written, like there's a fate, and it doesn't consider any expansion, any evolution. It usually comes on Facebook or Instagram as a line saying, this is how Pisces are, this is how a Scorpio is, and even though it's entertaining, it's far from the truth. And so could you shed a bit of light into how astrology actually considers evolution and expansion?